Good morning. Today is Wednesday, the 7th day of Shevat. And today we begin chapter 21 in Tanya. What are we talking about? So the point the Alter Rebbe is in the middle, the case that is building up now is the case that the world is nothing, has no significance in the eyes of Hashem. And when we say that it has no significance, obviously God created it. We feel ourselves very significant, but in Hashem's perspective, it has no significance whatsoever. Our job is to make sure that we do not make it significant. Meaning, when we think and understand the idea that everything is Hashem, and we do not attribute any significance to any creation, thinking that it is independently existing, this is where we fulfill our mission. And in last chapter 20, the Alter Rebbe gave an example for us to understand the concept when we say that the whole world has no significance. The example that he used was speech. And as it says, Hashem created the world with speech. So the Alter Rebbe used the example, just like speech has no significance compared to its source. And I have to clarify one thing, the question that I was asked yesterday after the class. What does it mean when we say that speech has no significance? Obviously, speech has a lot of significance, has a lot of value. Our sages tell us, Mavas v'chaim beyad lashon, life and death is on the tongue. A word can make a difference. When we say one word, you can change your whole world with one word. So obviously, the words are very, very significant. But we're talking over here about something else, about comparing the ability of speaking compared to one word. What is the significance of one word compared to the whole ability of speaking, to its source? Like, for example, you compare one penny to $1 million. There's very little significance, but it has some significance. But compare it to a hypothetical concept of a machine that creates endless money. So that penny has no significance. So one word has no significance compared to the ability of speaking. Now, where does speech come from? It comes from our thoughts. First, it comes from you have in the soul, you have the power of speech. And yet there is deeper sources, higher sources, which is in the thoughts. And there is yet deeper sources within the person, that is in the emotions. Sometimes people go to a therapist to try to bring out in words things that the person has very deeply rooted in himself, in his emotions. And sometimes you need help to bring it out into words. So those words that you express and you say and you speak, those words exist in a different form, not in the shape of letters, but it exists in the source, which is the emotions of the person. And within the emotions, they are there. They are the source of the words, but they don't exist in the shape of words. That's why you can't say that you love someone in English, or you love them in Hebrew, or in Yiddish, or in Chinese. There's no language of what you love. You express, you can think in a language, You speak in a language, but you feel, the feeling is the words before it was formed in the shape of letters. And there is even higher source than the emotions, and that is the thought, the understanding, because emotions come as a result of understanding. When you have the idea, when you have the concept in your mind before you feel the concept. So there the speech is even in a higher source and even less of significance. And like this, this is what Alter Rebbe explained last chapter, how the world that Hashem created has no significance, just like speech. Speech has no significance compared to its source, all the way to the very original source, which is the soul itself, with the 10 attributes of the soul. Same thing as Hashem. The same thing is by God, that the world that He created has no significance whatsoever in compared to Hashem Himself, compared to Himself. However, now the Alter Rebbe is asking a question in this chapter 21. He needs to clarify this. Because after all, the speech, when we speak, we have the word that came out, you cannot take it back. Once the word was uttered, the word exists and it developed as independent existence. You cannot take back words that you said. But when we're talking, so how can you compare it to God's creation of the world and say what the same thing you can say by Hashem? God created the world and now we cannot take it back. Hashem, there is no other existence outside of God Himself. So how can you compare the creation to speech? Okay, that is the question. And Alter Rebbe comes and answers that you're right. You're absolutely right. You cannot compare it. And that is why the speech cannot be compared to Hashem's. However, there is two elements of speech. There's two characteristics of speech. And the reason why we use the metaphor of speech referring to God creating the world is because the second characteristics. What are the two characteristics? Number one, the speech is bringing out something else. You speak and you create something with speech, something outside of you. The other characteristic of speech is the characteristic of revealing. Something that was hidden within you, when you want to reveal, you use speech. And this is why they use the term speech referring to Hashem, creating this world. That what Hashem had revealed within Him, what Hashem had concealed within Him, Hashem revealed to the world. The same thing is with speech. When God is speaking to prophets, it is also the revelation, the revealing of what Hashem had concealed. This characteristic of speech applies to God creating the world, not the element of separation. When you speak, it is separated. That characteristic it is true, doesn't apply to Hashem, because Hashem, there's nothing outside of the existence of Hashem. So, but yet the speech that is coming out, which is revealing, and it is revealing only to the outside. To Hashem, it's all within Hashem, all within God. And we will explain it a little more as we go on in the class today. So let's look inside. Says the Alter Rebbe, והנה, Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheloi kemidas basav adam. It says that the nature of the divine order is not like that of human being, a creature of flesh and blood. So therefore, it says human terms cannot adequately describe the divine qualities. So in our case, Sha'adam kashemedaber dibur, ari hevel adibur shebefiv u'mugesh v'nireh davar b'fnei atzmai muvdal misharashay. When a man says something, the breath of the spoken word may be sensed and is perceived as an independent entity, separated from its source. Shehein eser b'chinos hanefesh atzma, which are the 10 faculties of the soul itself. The 10 faculties of the soul, the intellectual faculties, the emotional faculties, as we said before, this is the source of the speech. But the speech of God is not, heaven forbid, separated from his divine self. Why? Because there is nothing outside of him. Comes from the Zohar. It says there is no place devoid of him. So the speech of Hashem is not the same. We cannot use the same metaphor using the metaphor of speech. Therefore, his speech is not like our speech, God forbid. Just as his thoughts is not like our thoughts. As it is written, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. And is also written, my ways are higher than your ways. And it goes on that verse, it says, and so my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. So we're not talking about the same concept of thoughts. So why, after all, why do we use the metaphor of thought if this is not the same thing? Says Alter Rebbe, because there is an aspect of thoughts that does apply, and we can apply somewhat to Hashem. And that's what Alter Rebbe says. God's speech is called speech only in order to illustrate that the quality of revelation which it possesses. Speech reveals. Just like the speech of a human. It reveals to the listeners that which was concealed and hidden in his thought. Same thing as above, in the Eins of the endless life force of Hashem. This coming out of this light, the emergence of the light of Ein Sof from him, blessed be him, from the concealed state into the revealed state. To create and animate the worlds. This is called speech. And these are the 10 utterances which with the world was created. The world was created with the 10 utterances, as we says in the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, God created, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So we call it speech. And the reason why we call it speech is because of this is one of the aspects of speech, that it reveals and brings out that which was hidden. Likewise, all the other words of the Torah, the prophets and the holy writings that the prophets received and they perceived in their prophetic vision, this is also speech of Hashem. And God's speech and thoughts are united with Him in absolute union. Derech mashal, כמו דיבורוי ומחשבתא של אדם באוידם בכוח חוכמתו ושכלו. And Alter Rebbe is going to say now that there is also this aspect of the speech being hidden within yourself, we find also by humans. And that is, as we said earlier, that the words that you have, when you speak, they're already separated. Even when you think, those words are received already a shape of letters in your mind, in your thoughts. But beforehand, when it's still in your emotions, the words are there, but not in the shape of words. They're one with you. You cannot be defined as separate words. Or even further, even deeper in yourself, in your mind, before it came to the feeling of emotions. So this is, the Alter Rebbe says, that this is an example that we can use in understanding somewhat the concept that by Hashem also the speech is revealed only to the others, not to himself. It is not separated. It is one within himself. That's what he says. Derech mashal, for example, like the speech and thoughts of man, while it is still in the faculty of wisdom and intellect, or as they exist in a desire or craving that is still in the heart, before it rises from the heart to the brain, to meditate upon it, and with the letters of thoughts. In other words, when you have a feeling, you don't have words with it. Like we said before, you don't have a language that you feel with. Then after you feel it, you can bring it up and you can think what you are feeling in your mind, and then it has received letters, it has a language already. And at that point, before one speaks or thinks the letter of his speech and thought, which evolved from the aforementioned longing and desire, he says it was still bekoyach balev. It was still in a potential state in the heart. And there they were absolutely unified with their source. What is the source of the speech? Which is the wisdom, the intellect in the brain, and the longing and the desire in the heart. So there the speech is one with the source. So the same thing as when we're talking about the speech, the same thing we're talking about the speech of Hashem. It is the creation of the world. In Hashem, it's all one thing, and it never goes out. It only goes out to us. Only by us, it is becomes separate in our perspective. But in the perspective of Hashem, it is really one thing. So this is the end of today's shir. What we take from here is the point of the how the world is really one. When we realize that the world is one, we're all one with Hashem, and nothing is outside of Hashem. Even though the world can look like a chaotic, miserable, separated, divided world, but when you realize that everything is the Hashem, and you find the godliness in everything, then you start living your life in a different way, in a different level. This is what we meditate about, the Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, and ultimately, this is what we strive to teach the world. That ultimately will bring peace and harmony in the entire world, which is the idea of the coming of Mashiach. So, again, thank you for joining, and please share this, subscribe, comment. We should have a wonderful day. Any questions? We can take now questions.